Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Welcome to Flight Simulation. My name is Russell Hartley, and I'll be your facilitator today as we cover the benefits of an at-home simulator. Today's presenter, Chris McGonegle, will cover what makes a simulator, leading hardware and software packages, and what we know about the upcoming products and programs. Quick reminder that this webinar will be recorded and posted to our YouTube page, along with all of our previous webinars. So without further delay, Chris, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Russ. I appreciate that introduction, and thank you everyone who's attending today. We are going to talk about welcome to flight simulation and how you are able to get the most from your at-home simulator. Today's presentation, we've got about 50 slides. At the end, we'll have some Q&A, and then as Russ mentioned, today's webinar will be archived on our YouTube page. I'd imagine that'll be available within the next 6 to 12 hours tops. But either way, let's jump on in. A little bit about myself. My name is Chris McGonegle. I am a product manager here at Sporty's Pilot Shop. I'm a commercial pilot with an instrument rating, and I'm a graduate of Sporty's Academy. So from my first hour to the last hour, I've been flying here at Claremont County Airport. I know a lot of the ins and outs. That picture you see on the slide is from Oshkosh, and I've got a good grasp of the real life pilot side, but also the flight sim side. I have been using flight simulators since I think I was about 7 years old, and I've got a good grasp of how the two can work together. So that's a lot of what we're going to cover today. So looking at today's outline, we are going to cover the flight sim timeline, what's happened in the last few decades. We're going to go over defining the home simulator. Today's popular hardware, we'll focus mainly on yoke, throttle, and pedals, and we're just going to do an introduction to those. We have other webinars that really gets into a lot of products, but for time allotment today, we're just going to do a quick breeze over those. Same with software, we're going to focus majority of our attention on Microsoft Flight Sim and X-Plane 12, but we do have a couple other options there. We'll cover add-ons, great ways to improve the native programs. How to use a simulator. Once you've got one built, what do you do with it? And then we're going to cover Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 and what whispers or rumblings we have heard or seen. And then we'll conclude with some questions and answers. So let's jump into that timeline. In 1979, FS1 Flight Simulator from SubLogic was released, and the building block for what we have today was laid. It's now 44 years since that came out, and you could get a little bit of terrain, airspeed, altitude indications on a purple dial, an indicated turn rate, heading, vertical velocity or VSI, and a few engine indicators. We have come a very long way in what a simulator offers to us. But let's take it step by step. We had Microsoft Flight Sim 2.0 in 1984. This started to bring a little bit more colors onto the screen. As we continue, we started to get additional aircraft. We started to get more vivid dials and indicators. We started to see realistic airport indications. We got more customizable features, and eventually we got to where we are today with Microsoft Flight Sim 2020. When looking at the top left and the bottom right, you can see the view from a typical Cessna 172 has changed drastically. Let's describe what makes a flight simulator. There's really three things you need in order to have a simulator. The first one is a computer. Now this could be a 3-webinar part to cover computers, graphics cards, storage, video, all the above. We're not going to do that today. If you are in need of a computer, we have a few blogs online. I also recommend searching gaming computer. The price for a medium gaming computer today is a lot less than it was 5 years ago. So a lot more accessible and a lot more options out there. But you will need a computer to have a simulator. You'll need hardware, which is basically the way that you as the user interacts with the simulator, what sits in front of you. We're all used to using a mouse and keyboard when we type. Well, a flight simulator needs some hardware so you can convey what the aircraft should do. And then lastly, you need the brains, which is the software. And once you have those three things, you have yourself a flight simulator. So let's jump on into some popular hardware options, and we're going to begin with the most used for flight simulator, which are yokes. This will control your pitch, your roll, a lot of other add-ons, and then also usually throttle management. The two most popular we have here are the SATEC or Logitech flight simulator yoke with throttle quadrant. That's the image on the left. You can see that that yoke has a screen on the front with a timer. It also has a independent throttle control on the right side. So you're able to move that from the right side of the yoke to the left side to simulate you're sitting in a right seat of an aircraft. That throttle has three levers, a throttle, prop, and mixture control. It also has detents, and then there are three two-way buttons at the base of that throttle. That's a great starter piece. It is a lot of plastic, so I wouldn't recommend it for the hardcore simmer, if you will, but it is a great piece to kind of get into flight simulation. Our absolute most popular yoke here at Sporty's is the one on the right, which is the Honeycomb Alpha Flight Simulator yoke. It's difficult to explain the realism of it. It's better so when you've actually tested it out. Some of the things I really like about it is you'll see that the yoke sits on a metal shaft, which rides on ball bearings. So it's a very smooth movement forward and aft of the yoke. It has a full 90 degrees deflection, full left and full right. And then another unique feature about Honeycomb's yoke is on the inside, instead of using metal springs, which is pretty common with a lot of other yoke manufacturers, they used bungee cords, both for the push and the pull and then the rotation left and right. And that really eliminates any dead zones that you may feel with other yokes. Do not ask me how I found out that there are bungee cords under the hood of this, but I can say it was a great development for Honeycomb and one that's made this our most popular yoke. A couple throttle options. If you may recognize the one on the left, that is the standalone Logitech throttle, which gives you the basics, your throttle, your prop, your mixture, and a couple two-way hat switches. This is great for if you want to add two of these and create a 6-lever configuration for multi-engine. Also great if you want to not financially commit too much and figure out if a flight sim is right for you. I like to recommend that Logitech throttle. On the right, we have the Redbird alloy single throttle in vernier style, which is a almost pull out of a Cessna 172, what we see right there. It has throttle, prop, and mixture. It is mainly, if not all, metal components. The propeller control and the mixture control both have twist abilities. So if you want to make those really small, precise changes, you can do it with this control similar to you would in an aircraft. We also have a landing gear indicator and a flap lever on the far right side. This is probably the most expensive hardware piece we'll talk about today. It is professional grade, but if you are committed to the vernier style of throttles, it's one to research. The third and final throttle we'll talk about is the Honeycomb Bravo, which I will officially endorse saying it is the Swiss Army knife of flight simulator hardware. This piece does a lot in a small package. And you're going to notice it has the exact same chassis, if you will, or base of what the Honeycomb Alpha does, but this one focuses on throttle and then some. So some of the most recognizable features on it, and I'm going to move from the left side of the screen counterclockwise up to the top. We have a 2-position gear lever with an accurate 3-light indicator on the front panel. We have a color-coded trim wheel. We have 6 different levers, each with detents that freely flow at the main point of this throttle. As we move to the right side, we have a tension knob, so you can change how difficult it is to move said levers. We have a flap lever on the right side. And then on the very top of the Honeycomb Bravo, we have the autopilot controls, which I think are very, very valuable if you want to better understand how autopilots transition through different phases of commands. how to activate vertical speed over altitude hold, things of that sort. So this is a really great piece, and financially, I think one that gives you a lot of options. It doesn't stop there. The Honeycomb Bravo is also configurable. So right now we see 6 levers. We can interchange those to indicate, say, single engine non-complex. Here's your Cessna 172 with just a throttle and a mixture lever. Or here is your 182, a throttle, a prop, and a mixture control. We then have the starting image, which is multi-engine. But then we also get some airliner or private jet setups. So here is a 2-engine commercial airliner, or think private jet, with your 2 throttles on the inside, a speed brake on the left, and then your flap lever on the right. And then of course we need the 4-engine wide body option also. These all come in the same box. These aren't add-ons. So really 5 different categories of aircraft right there you can set this simulator or throttle up for. So Honeycomb Bravo is a great piece. It's one I use almost exclusively. The lesser known need, I would say, of hardware will be your rudder pedals. We have the Thrustmaster Flight rudder pedals. They counter sway, so when you push on the right one, the left one will come back. They each have customizable footwells and toe brakes. And then we also have our Logitech rudder pedals. These are very similar to the Thrustmaster, whereas these give you differing size in those footwells. You can see that little push button towards the center of each well. And then there's also a tension dial, so you can change the amount of resistance you have there. A couple accessories or hardware add-ons, if you will. If you fly with an electronic flight bag, or EFB, using ForeFlight or Garmin Pilot, you can bring that into a simulator and use your EFB in tandem with the simulator. I like to use an EFB mount so I can quickly apply it to my desk, turn on the simulator, and then watch my aircraft travel on ForeFlight or Garmin Pilot while my simulated airplane flies also. We have that EFB mount here at Sporty's, and then the Trim Wheel Pro. If you purchase a yoke that does not have throttle included, such as the Honeycomb Bravo throttle did, highly recommend Trim Wheel to make sure you're flying cleanly. Rounding out accessories, we have the ProFlight radio panel. So this gives you the ability to easily and quickly change comms, nav, ADF, transponder codes with the click of a button, rather than trying to use your mouse in a bumpy digital aircraft. We use that quite a bit. And then we have the ProFlight multi-panel, which additionally gives you autopilot, pitch trim, auto throttle, flaps, and a couple other things there. Some new entrants to the hardware realm. First one is the Thrustmaster Viper TQS Mission Pack. What's unique about this is it is a 1-to-1 scale for what you'll find in an F-16 Viper. So the throttle on the left side, you can see that it has a couple detents on there. That's actually the idle and afterburner detents. It is a 1-to-1 scale of what's actually in that aircraft. You can see a lot of metal knobs, some switches, some levers. On the front or center of it, if depending on how you're looking at it, there is the gear indicator. And then my personal favorite, at the top of the device, you're going to see that slap switch for deploying shaft/flares. So really a lot of thought went into this. And when connected or used in tandem with the Viper stick, you've got something pretty close to what those F-16 drivers are using. The Honeycomb family wouldn't be complete without pedals. These pedals have been online for about a couple years now. We have yet to see them in the States. We think they will be available in the next 6 months, if you will. So we have been staying close to Honeycomb, asking them where these are throughout the process. We're very excited to test them out. And if they live up to the standard that Honeycomb brought with the Alpha and the Bravo, we're sure these are going to be great. But something to keep your eye on over the next 6 to 12 months. And then lastly, in entrance, we have the Yawman Aero Controller. This is a unique piece that feeds into the aviation feel. You can see there's a trim wheel on the bottom left of this controller. There's also 2 pull or vernier style levers at the bottom center. There's 2 sliders on the right. And then something this image doesn't do a great job of conveying is there are bumper sliders on the very top where your pointer fingers would naturally rest. And they operate similarly to those pedals we talked about. When you push down on the right bumper, the left one comes up. When you push down on the left bumper, the right one comes up. So counter swaying, if you will, similar to pedals, and that is what they are intended for. So a lot of thought went into the Allman Aero controller, and these are expected to be market ready around November 20th of this year. So we're a couple weeks away, and we're excited to support this product when it is market ready. All right, so now we've covered hardware. Let's move on to software. We're going to start out the gate with Microsoft Flight Sim 2020. This program came out in August of 2020. It's been out, so let's say about a little over 3 years now, and it has been extremely popular with the flight sim community. As shown with our first images, the progression of flight sim, even to this image right here, you can't get away from the fact that this looks almost like something you could take in your own aircraft. Here's a Cessna 172 flying over some very highly detailed landscape. And I think they offered a really great product with this. I've spent quite a few hours on the program. That's one that we're going to cover quite a bit today. So what are some things we like about Microsoft Flight Sim? Other than how great it looks, how vivid the details are, there's also a lot of things that really speak to pilots. The first one for me is flight planning. I really like that I'm able to create a flight plan from airport A to airport B. I can have waypoints along the way. I can choose what type of route I want, whether it's an IFR, low altitude airway, a direct, a VOR. We have that ability. And as you can see on this image, it also times out based off the distance and our aircraft selected. Just a lot of great features about it. I additionally like that it gives you a profile view. So I can see time to climb, how long I'll be at cruise, at what point I should start my descent. So it really does bring in that aviation feel towards the simulator. Another thing we like is flight training. Microsoft Flight Sim natively offers basic handling, takeoff and landings, VFR navigation, airliner training, bush pilot flying, and then IFR navigation. In each one of these categories, we get multiple different lessons or maneuvers we can practice, and each maneuver gives you a good breakdown of what's expected, how long this maneuver is going to take, areas in the aircraft you should focus for, and really what the end result or end desire is for that maneuver. So that's another thing I really like about Microsoft is they put a lot of focus into these training modules that get you closer to being someone who flies a physical aircraft. They also offer landing challenges. These are updated constantly. I believe a batch of new landing challenges came out a week ago or two. They rank anywhere from common to epic or famous. They put you in a condition of you're going to go land at this airport. Here is arrival runway, runway length, runway elevation. For this scenario, flying into Courchevel, we're in a TBM 930. They'll even give you a layout of how your approach is coming, what speed you should relatively be at, where the wind is coming from, and what strength it's offering. And then it'll also give you a breakdown with a max score of 2 million of how you flew that approach. I think it's a fun, unique way to show one of the most important phases of flying. It is a little bit with the ranking a step towards gaming, if I dare say, but it is also a really nice thing to keep people engaged, to challenge you, and to show what's important about flying. So landing challenges are something I like to cover. Bush trips, I've spent more time on bush trips than I'd like to admit. Think of these as ways to explore large areas of the vastly improved design of the world in Microsoft Flight Sim. Whether you're discovering Denmark, Finland, Iceland, the dozens of bush trips that are natively in the program, it's a great way to spend a lot of time. Recently, I've been flying the Discover Norway, which is a total of 14 legs, which is about 7 hours of flight time and 1,200 miles. I've not completed it, But what I like is it gives you a breakdown of how long each leg is, what you're going to be doing on said leg, and then when you activate that leg, it's pre-programmed into your GPS, also on the moving map, and then a little bit of a nav log on the left to give you a breakdown of where you're flying, what's unique about it. This lake, this bridge, this dam, this castle, all covered with bush flying. And it's really a way of feeling like you have a tour guide as you visit these quote unquote digital parts of the world. So Microsoft Flight Sim, great program and one to consider if you're interested in flight simulation. The other juggernaut when it comes to flight simulation is X-Plane 12. This was released December of 2022, so it's almost 1 year old. It builds on previous iterations. I flew X-Plane 9, 10, 11, and now I've flown 12 quite a bit. It's a very realistic simulator. I've found that the numbers I see on some of the gauges in X-Plane 12 are very to extremely accurate to what I would get in a Cessna 172 when climbing out at certain density altitude, certain power settings, weight and balance. So I really like X-Plane 12 from a training perspective as well as instrument flying. But let's get into some unique features about it. When creating a new flight, it's pretty simple. You select your aircraft. On the top right, I can type in my location, India 69er for Claremont County Airport. I can start at the airport and decide which end of the runway, which parking spot. But another thing I really like about X-Plane 12 is if you look on the kind of center of the screen, right now we've selected on runway. There's a drop down for 3 nautical miles final or 10 nautical mile final. I like this because you can quickly and consistently practice short or long approaches and really work on some approach slash landings, if you will. Rather than firing it up, flying the pattern, coming in and landing, you can quickly do the 3-mile approach to runway 22 here at Claremont County fast. So that's one feature I really like to highlight about X-Plane 12, among others. The weather. We have a lot of control options when it comes to the weather in X-Plane 12. On our main menu or starting screen, you'll see weather is on the right side. We can click on that and we can quickly change what type of default settings we have for the day. You'll see the sliders towards the top right, atmospheric conditions, precipitation, temperature, all the above. We also have the ability to inject live weather into it. So if you see on the bottom screen, there is a drop down that says manually enter weather, which we're currently doing. You can also choose download real weather. It takes about 30 seconds to a minute, but it will project whatever the day's METAR reports are into that quote unquote digital location in X-Plane 12. And as you can see, we have the different winds aloft settings for that day. We can also change what time of the year we're flying quickly or by entering it in. And just another little feature of X-Plane 12 we like to highlight. Something I've been using a little bit more recent is the ability to have a path review, if you will. So here you can see my path as I took off from CVG right over there, which is southwest of downtown Cincinnati. Flying to Lunken, as you can see, I descended and I am now making a left turn for a left downwind on runway 21 left, which is right here. To be able to see maybe where I wasn't as smooth in my movement or I was jumpy or aggressive, I think is a unique thing we can reflect on after a flight. Another thing I want to highlight about X-Plane 12 is, and really flight simulations as a whole, if you haven't flown a simulator in the last few years, they're pretty accurate when it comes to what's happening outside the aircraft versus in. For instance, on this approach, flying into Lunken 21 left, you can see that my airspeed is right about 65, which I want on final, but my ground speed is 48, and that is because the weather for the day was about a 14 to 15 knot wind coming down the runway. So my ground speed has taken that difference versus what the aircraft indicator is giving me. I think that's pretty cool that it's able to calculate that and show me, even though what would happen in real aircraft where airspeed indicator says 65, ground speed is 48, that's happening in the simulator too. So another thing that I liked recently while flying. And then final thing to cover is replay mode. So I flew this aircraft down on the runway 21 left, and then in view, you can toggle replay mode, and you'll see there's a slider towards the top of our screen. I quickly just move that little slider to the left a little bit. As you let go, it drops you where you were at that point throughout the flight. Additionally, we can move outside the aircraft. So I can now see how my approach looks from outside. Did I have my flaps? Was I in a good approach position? All these things we can now analyze. You could even take yourself and instead of flying the left seat, move yourself over, about 1.5 feet and see what the flight would have been like if you were in the instructor's view for this replay mode. I also really like doing this for analyzing touchdowns of did I get 2 wheels on and then a nose wheel for a soft field landing. It's a nice feature and one that really helps you to review flights from beginning to end. Next program we'll talk about is Prepared. Prepared is owned by Lockheed Martin. It is, from my understanding, a rebranding of FSX or Flight Sim X, and it's a very militarily focused version, if you will. Version 6 came out not too long ago. I believe it was in June of this year, and it's very, very accurate. They offer different buildups. They offer a very modularly focused setup. There's no user interface focus that maybe Microsoft or X-Plane really dialed into. This is more of what aircraft, what location, time of day, go. I talked to a lot of professional pilots who prefer Prepared over the other 2 programs. I think it's a feather in the cap of its authenticity, but it is worth knowing it is a little less desirable if you're new to flight simulation, and it can also be more expensive. They offer the personal setup program of $60. There's the professional, and then professional plus, which is just under $2,800. So Prepared is a great one, but today we were trying to focus on an introduction to flight sim, which is not one I would recommend Prepared for. Another program I like to highlight is Infinite Flight. This is a mobile device program. And what I mean by that is you can run this program on your phone or on your tablet. And the way it operates is you don't need a yoke to plug in, you don't need throttles and pedals. You can use the accelerometers in your phone or in your tablet as a way of saying, I'm pushing forward, or I'm pulling back, or I'm turning left, or I'm turning right. You're able to use those accelerometers towards influencing how the aircraft responds to the program. I also like it because it very conveniently connects to your electronic flight bag or EFB. So right here, I'm using my phone to fly Infinite Flight while I have it also conveying that information to ForeFlight on my iPad. I can do this at my desk. I can do it on the go. This is via a Bluetooth connection, so no Wi-Fi needed. It's very quick. I mean, theoretically, you could be in an airliner with no internet, have these 2 devices connected, and fly around. So I really like Infinite Flight for the EFB connection. I know it works with both ForeFlight and Garmin Pilot quite easily. Earlier this year, they added some different categories of flight. About a month ago, they updated their multiplayer focus with a new leaderboard. A few other things are the free flight, flight training, and missions. And they also offer VOR navigation, so a great way to better understand VOR radials, your location, intercept angles, and they also offer human ATC. So you're going to be talking to an actual human when you're using ATC in their program. I really like using Infinite Flight when I'm not at my desk, and it's one to consider if you are a mobile user and you're interested in flight simulation. Let's get into payware, and these are the add-ons for our simulators. These are things you would have to throw onto the program after you've purchased it. It doesn't come out of the box, if you will. And there's 2 categories we'll cover, which is payware, meaning it is going to cost you a little bit, and then freeware, where you can find these on the internet, no cost, and add them in. So with payware in Microsoft, in the program, there's a marketplace where you can purchase aircraft, you can purchase airports, you can find these programs that developers have created, been vetted by Microsoft and then are then offered through their marketplace right in the program. Makes it very easy for a one-click download, activate, and then go fly rather than having to drag stuff between folders. You can also find world updates or activities. So if you want to take a little bit of training in the IFR FS Academy or a jetliner, or if you're interested in some of these other bush pilot flights, these are all available, and a lot of them are available within Microsoft Flight Simulator's marketplace. With Xplane, xplane.org is my go-to spot. The unique thing about Xplane is because they're on version 12 and their program add-ons are upward and downward compatible. If you purchased an aircraft for Xplane 11, it should, and I want to emphasize should rather than will, just to make sure I'm not checking myself here, it should work with Xplane 12. So when you buy a program for Xplane 12 and Xplane 13 comes out in who knows how many years, it's upward compatible. Because of that compatibility, there are a lot of options there. Developers realize I'm going to have a lot of time to sell my product, so I'm going to develop them and put the time in. If someone came to me and said, I have this specific aircraft in my hangar with this panel layout, should I get Microsoft or should I get Xplane? I actually recommend Xplane just because of this reason. There's so many different aircraft that you're probably most likely going to find the one you're looking for. So if you are an Xplane user and you want a specific bird, xplane.org is going to be your go-to. Another payware I like to recommend is Pilot Edge. If you're serious about communication proficiency, Pilot Edge is for you. Personally, I have come back from being a rusty pilot in real life, and communicating with ATC or a towered airport seemed just as daunting to me as flying that busy pattern or getting back into flying. And Pilot Edge was helpful for me to get online, talk to active pilots, active tower operators, and get over that concern of it's a real human, I want to use the right terminology. They actually employ real life ATC, real life tower operators, people who get paid in the real world to communicate to pilots. And then in their off time, they come into Pilot Edge and do the same thing. Because of that, they are compensated by Pilot Edge. And because of that, Pilot Edge has a subscription model. It's not expensive, and you actually save a little bit of money when you get the annual setup, but it is great to know you can do a monthly setup, maybe for 3 months, get that rust off your communication skills, work with some of those other digital pilots you'll see on the screen, and get better at communicating. Another payware option I like is Take Flight Interactive. If you're committed to using a flight simulation device towards training or to work alongside your training, highly recommend this. This will give you multiple lessons at which you can practice flying an aircraft. You'll then get an evaluation and a challenge. It also interacts with you throughout the maneuver. I've flown a few programs where it says, here's what's expected. Okay, go fly. And there's no more interaction until you say, I'm finished. With this, it will give you, hey, you're flying a little too low, pull back, or hey, your airspeed's too fast, you need to slow it down. I think that's very beneficial and is similar to what you get from an instructor sitting in the right seat next to you. Additionally, it gives you breakdowns of what kind of score did you get for those building blocks of each maneuver. Here we can see on our first turn, this user got an 87.9%, and on their second, they got a 93.1 for a cumulative or average 90.5 for both turns. I think that's great. You can show improvement, degradation, all the above, and then it gives you a dashboard for viewing how you've been doing over time, where your weak areas are. So again, I greatly recommend Take Flight Interactive, and it's one I fire up quite a bit. All right, so we've covered payware. Let's get into freeware. Let's say we don't want to financially commit to anything else. We just bought a new computer. We bought all these hardware pieces. We now have a program. I want to save a little bit. What else can I add? Well, freeware is the answer for you. Microsoft Flight Sim has a few options. They're not updated as regularly as I would like, but MSFS add-ons is one I like to frequently check. You can find helicopters, airliners, avionics package updates. So that's a great one to look into. And we actually developed our airport here at Sporty's for users who would like to bring in Claremont County Airport to their Microsoft Flight Sim program. We had a little bit of fun with this. You'll find some Easter eggs. You'll see Sporty's Pilot Shop on the roof of our building. I can promise you that's not actually there. We even went as far as to make sure on Saturdays from noon to 2, if you fly in, you're going to see a digital grill with hot dogs being cooked right out on the flight line, which is accurate to what we do here at the airport. So a fun thing we like to put together for the community, and we sell for free. Xplane 12, a couple options I've found, or best I would say, is xplane.to. It is a little old, if you will, but they have a lot of aircraft and a lot of activities that are free for you to download and enjoy. Xplane 12 themselves, they also have a featured freeware category on their site. This too is dated, but as I mentioned earlier, because of the compatibility between older versions and new, that Boeing 737 is going to work great in X-Plane 11, X-Plane 12. So one worth checking out, and maybe you'll find an aircraft that means a lot to you. If Pilot Edge sound appealing, but the subscription model was a little intimidating, let me introduce you to VATSIM. VATSIM does a lot of the same things that Pilot Edge does, but no cost. It is a community-driven and regulated program. It doesn't have those real-world tower controllers, but that is the reason that it is free. There's a lot of people who use VATSIM. They are a partner of Microsoft Flight Sim, and I know quite a few pilots who will use this as a great way to keep that communication skill strong and fly into some new areas. As you can see, it is a very active program with a lot of aircraft. All right, so we've covered hardware, we've covered software, we've covered add-ons. So let's get into how are we going to use a simulator? You've just spent all this time, effort, money into building it. What do we use it for? And that's what we're going to cover here. Now, before I dive into some good maneuvers to keep in the back of your mind, I do want to say there is a 10-foot rule I like to highlight for simulator. I do not know why, but whenever you get to within 10 feet of the ground, simulators start to lose a little bit of their credibility. I want to set the tone that you are not going to be able to critique your flares in a real life aircraft in a simulator. It just doesn't work in that critical phase of flight when Newton's law and all these other things are influencing that small amount of feel and how the aircraft touches down. These programs are not going to be able to accurately simulate that. When you're en route, when you're practicing maneuvers, when you're doing a lot of other things, they can, but the flare, for some reason, it doesn't connect with me, so I just want to make sure that's known. Taxing is another one. For some reason, I cannot find a simulator that accurately gives me good feedback on when I'm pushing full with my left foot, the airplane turns as it would in real life. So another kind of funny thing about it, but just keep in mind that 10-foot rule when you are practicing maneuvers. And then another thing I like to highlight when it comes to uses is have a plan. I'm guilty of this. I've turned on a flight simulator and just said, what am I doing today? Or let's go explore. Or let's see where the sun's about to set and I'm going to fly into it. To have an actual plan, a training course outline, to have a mission, it really does make sure that the simulator offers you a lot of feedback, a lot of usefulness, and is really the right way, I think, to use a simulator as a pilot or a budding pilot. There are a lot of programs and books out there. This is one I actually have on my desk that is timeless. These will give you scenarios. You can start from just taxiing to navigation to flight plans. And these are all things that you can bring into a simulator when you start it up and say, today, I'm going to practice normal takeoffs. Food for thought. Some other uses are better understanding of weather control. So here we have Microsoft Flight Sim. This is the outside the aircraft view as we're flying along. And I'm able to bring up the weather tab and quickly change what certain weather settings look like. So here we have 2:45 in the afternoon. We can quickly take it to 3:51 a.m., see what the area around us looks like at about 4 a.m. We can then drag that slider up towards, like I mentioned, when the sun's going down. We want to give ourselves a nice picturesque view as we're flying. We can additionally change the cloud layers. So here we can choose clear skies, few clouds, scattered clouds, all the above presets. We can also take those cloud layers you'll see that I've highlighted and change the features of each one. So on this page, I am changing that bottom cloud layer. I'm going to change the altitude, the bottom of it. I'm also going to change the altitude top. I'm going to really thicken them up and make it a scenario of, a lot of clouds or thick clouds in my area and what those would look like, and get a better understanding of cloud tops and bottoms. In X-Plane, as mentioned, we have that downloadable content for weather. We can go ahead and jump into the aircraft on a day where maybe we didn't want to go flying because weather was a little bit below or above our minimums, and we want to go flying it anyway. Well, you can quickly do that with X-Plane. Checklist memory. I like highlighting this because I was one of those pilots who took a poster similar to the one on the screen. I taped it to the back of the door in my room, and I would just sit there running through emergencies or scenarios, finding out when I should retry turning the keys or flipping a switch or adding mixture full and leaning throttle. In a simulator, we're able to go ahead and make those inputs and receive feedback. Whereas I just had to run through the scenarios and assume what would happen. We can bring a checklist in to a simulator and quickly run those scenarios, which I think is a very helpful way to use a simulator. We also have takeoff variations. There are a lot here. Some of the takeoff variations we can practice would be a normal takeoff and climb. We can get into the short field takeoff and climb and really challenge yourself. If you run the calculations and let's say a Cessna has to rotate at this density altitude and 800 feet, well, you can put yourself at a runway that's only 800 feet and change the weather settings to that density altitude and really see what it's like using all usable runway. We can do the soft field takeoff and climb, really practice that yoke aft setting when we go full throttle and keep the nose wheel off the ground as much as possible until we lift off. We're able to do crosswind takeoff and climb and really see what it's like having a strong crosswind as we are starting down the runway and how we need to slowly release a little bit of that aileron control. We can do the rejected takeoff, which I think is a one. I practice this maybe 5 or 6 times during my training, but it is helpful to know and get those feelings of I'm gonna reject this takeoff after 5 seconds, then after 6, then after 7, and find that area of where this is the maximum time before I can pull throttle and keep the aircraft on the runway or get it back down on the runway. Maneuvers with a ... I like to say, and this goes for those takeoffs, upcoming landings, do not think that because you've flown 10 steep turns in Microsoft Flight Simulator that you can go do it in an aircraft in real life. I like to look at maneuvers as a way to get better at doing a maneuver. You've already practiced in an aircraft, but at the same time, it's nice to know what a maneuver is or what's expected and maybe get a grasp for what would happen in flight training. But I do want to say, again, do not think you can go do a lot of maneuvers in a program and you're going to be an ace when you show up to flight school. Something I like to highlight is slow flight, getting a better understanding of that sluggishness of, if you will, of the controls, and keeping altitude while you're hearing continuous stall warning horns is always something to practice. Stalls, go ahead and engage that stall and see what happens when the nose breaks and the right ways to recover from that. We can practice our ground reference maneuvers with these amazingly vivid programs of when you look outside, you'll see accurate trees or rivers or houses. We can now use roads for S turns. We can use cornfields that we know about for rectangular course, turns around a point. Really a great way to practice some of these, the theories behind them, I should say. And then, of course, 8s on pylons, chandelles, which was my personal favorite. You can practice those commercial maneuvers also. It is a good way to practice the theories and the flows. So keep that in mind when you're using a flight simulator for maneuvers. Landing variations, again, this plays into that 10-foot rule, but the approach and the ways we go about some of these coming into lands are good to practice in a simulator. We can practice our normal landing, flying that pattern downwind to base to final, and working on when flaps are added, what power settings we like. We can work on the short field landing. Just as we practice the short field takeoff at extremes, try landing at extremes. We can go into the crosswind approach and landing, really, give yourself a 20 knot direct crosswind in a Cessna 172 and see why the manufacturers recommend 15 knot max. It's helpful to see. You can practice those soft field landings after it's been raining in the simulator, come into a grass runway and make sure you don't catch the nose in a divot. The slip approach. And then another one, Leslie practiced, but I think very important in today, is the go around. You're 10 seconds from touching down, maybe 100 feet AGL, and all of a sudden an aircraft pulls onto the runway. You've got full flaps, your RPMs are at 1500. What do you go? What do you do? And I think a simulator is a really great way to get proficient and quick at the flow there of what happens after each new input and how quickly can you get that bird flying again, get back into the pattern, and then come around. And having done 5, 10, 20 of these in a simulator, it's going to make you a lot more calm if you ever have to do that in real life. Cross-country pre-flight. I have done this before where I will jump in a simulator if I'm flying to a new airport and fly my route and get a better understanding of the area. I know by the time I get to this dense building area that I should probably start descending down to pattern altitude, or there's a tower here, so I need to stay north of that. The ability to connect a very detail-oriented program like Microsoft or X-Plane and what we see outside the airplane to our EFB, as I have on the left screen, really allows us to, in essence, fly the digital flight before the physical one and get a good understanding of where we're going if it's a new airport. Instrument flying, this is one we could present a whole nother webinar on, and we actually have. Back in February, we did an instrument-only flying flight simulation webinar. We have that one archived. If you are into instrument flying, I highly recommend checking it out. For today, we are going to glaze over this, not talk about instrument flying. But I will say simulators offer a lot of ability and advantages if you're in the instrument flying world and you want to use a simulator for that focus. EFB, we've covered that a little bit, but just as it's convenient to fly a digital aircraft along with your EFB, I like to learn new things about my EFB that I can only do when I'm in essence flying the aircraft. So if ForeFlight rolls out a new feature and I want to better understand it, I can go jump in the digital aircraft and fly up to altitudes and see what it's like using that new feature. And that's something that I really like about the two working together. We also have the ability to check how our flights progress. Were we holding altitude? Were we holding airspeed? How did our approach go? And it's a really helpful way to critique those little things and then take it into a real aircraft and save money sometimes. All right, so here is the what do we know phase of today's webinar. Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, it has been rumored to come out. They announced it not too long ago, but we're going to try and pull out what we know about this upcoming program that builds off of the 2020 version and see what we can figure out. So in June of this year, actually at, I believe it was Flight Sim Expo, they announced that they are building Microsoft Flight Sim 2024. There is a 2-minute and 14-second video that was put online. And my takeaway from the trailer is that they are making a move to focusing on what you can do with a pilot's license as a career, rather than what Microsoft Flight Sim 2020 did, which was, quote unquote, the sky is calling, which kind of pushes you into the go explore mantra. And as I mentioned with bush flying, I absolutely love exploring, but I also additionally love that FS 2024 is focusing on what can you do with a pilot's license. Some of the things that they are showing, or some of the areas where a pilot's license can take you, would be aerial firefighting, search and rescue, helicopter cargo transport, air ambulance, agricultural aviation, and then weather research, just to name a few. I think there were probably about a dozen more career paths or areas that they highlighted in this video. So if you are interested, I highly recommend after this webinar getting online and watching it. It definitely gets me excited for the program, and really helps me want to pick it up as soon as it comes out. Now I know that the fact that they've got a new program coming out only 4 years after the previous one concerns some people. It will be standalone. So if you own Microsoft Flight Sim 2020, you do not get Microsoft Flight Sim 24. You have to purchase it separately. But they will also support Microsoft 2020 for 10 years. So if you still like the older version, and it's weird saying older version is 2020, you buy it in 2025. I know for a fact Microsoft will keep supporting it through 2030, and make sure that you're not picking something up that's going to be difficult to use if you need support. But either way, 2024 I think is going to be really great towards finding people who are interested in aviation, and then also bringing them into here's what you can do with an aviation focus or career. I think it's going to be great for budding new pilots, but also show you how you can turn that enjoyment or hobby into a career. A lot of these maneuvers, they actually kind of remind me of one of the old FSX programs. So there was an executive tour in FSX which came out in 2006 where you have to fly the Secretary of Defense around Edwards Air Force Base following a space shuttle landing before they go to a meeting. But don't forget, that Secretary of Defense, they've got a little bit of a back injury, so don't pull too many G's, otherwise you fail. Trust me, I failed this one quite a bit. It may have been a little far-fetched in real life. How often does Secretary of Defense ride around in a King Air 350 while a space shuttle is landing before a meeting with back injuries? It's not likely. But I really like the structure and challenge that these missions provided, and that's really what I think FS 2024 is getting back to. Now, the current program, it does offer some similar things with the 40th anniversary update. They brought in a lot of old missions or segments, if you will. The transatlantic flight here we see from FS 2004 is now available for free in Microsoft Flight Sim 40th anniversary, which is also the latest, or I shouldn't say latest, but an update of FS 2020. They also have programs from 2004, from FSX. If you want to go fly the transcontinental speed run from San Diego, California, you can go do that. A lot of different things that take you a step towards that idea of how do you use an aircraft rather than just go fly around. So I'm excited about getting back to that with FS 2024 and how it's going to bring pilots more towards how to use it rather than let's have fun using it, if you will. One other thing I'd like to highlight is they are committed to professional pilot accuracy. So as of about a week ago, Microsoft on LinkedIn posted 4 job offerings for certified pilots who would like to join the team on a 18-month contract, and they're going to offer some Q&A to their flight sim users. So just as they have started advertising the program that's coming out, they're now building up their support team internally to better support pilots using, I think, Flight Sim 2024. So I'm very excited to see what this program can do, what it does for the community, what it does for people who have the aviation bug and they don't know it yet. A lot of good things coming with Microsoft Flight Sim 2024, and I can't wait for them to say, guess what? It's coming out in a few months, get ready. I'll anxiously be waiting. So let's review a flight simulator. Is it valuable? I may be a little biased, but I think flight sims offer a lot of use for anyone who's interested in aviation, who is starting down their career path in aviation, or they're looking for a fun pastime post a career in aviation. One of the stories I love to tell is about Evan Ryder, who is actually the founder, or one of the founders of Flight Sim Association. That is the group behind the Flight Sim Expo, which is held every year. Evan did his training, and I believe when he started training, he had so much time using a simulator correctly that on his intro flight, he was able to go ahead and run the radios while his instructor flew the aircraft. On my intro flight, I was just making sure my seatbelt was tight because I'm in this new foreign object. There's a whole new way of talking over the radios. The trees are getting pretty darn big very, very fast when coming into land. So I was just a passenger. But Evan actually was focused on flying the aircraft and communicating, and I think that is quite representative of what a simulator offers to us. And Evan has turned that passion of flight simulation into a career and now flies professionally. So I think when used correctly, Flight Simulator is very valuable and is a great resource for someone who is interested in aviation. Okay, so we have covered a lot of material. We're about almost 55 minutes in, so I'm going to open it up to Q&A, and I appreciate everyone who is still in the attendance. And Russ, if we have any questions, I'm ready to answer them to the best of my abilities.
Great presentation, Chris. Yeah, you got a couple of questions here. First one, what about using VR headsets? Are they worthwhile?
Yes, so VR headsets are a common question as of the last year. Uh, I I like to recommend them. I will say that there is a learning curve. Getting used to configuring the VR headset with your program, it's going to take you a little bit of time. But just as we were taught that when flying the pattern and you get to beam the numbers, you pull some power out. And then once you look over your shoulder and about a 45-degree over your left shoulder is where you see the runway, that's when it's time to start your turn to base. It's difficult to do that 45-degree turn in a non-VR headset program. So that's just one of the many reasons I think it is valuable. I will say that flying in a stationary chair and telling your eyes that you are moving, it causes your senses to be a little off. The first time I flew a simulator with a VR headset, after about 10 minutes, I felt very sick in my stomach. And I've done aerobatic flying. I've done a lot of stalls, steep turns, all the above, and I've never had stomach issues in the actual aircraft. It was in an office chair using a VR headset that I did. And it was because of that disconnect between my body not feeling any G-force changes, not feeling any sways, but yet my eyes convinced it was happening. So that's one thing I like to highlight also. But a lot of the benefit you get from a VR headset, you can do with a great, really big screen in front of you, or even maybe 3 screens in front of you. So if you are gung-ho about it, I would endorse using a VR headset. You can get very close to its usefulness with a couple screens in front of you.
Next question for you, Chris. What is the best way to tweak settings for the most realistic look and feel with the monitors and devices that I have? I'm currently using X-Plane 12.
Absolutely. So this question is kind of like saying I have a gear of this circumference. How do I get it to work correctly with this other gear? And no two computers that I know of, unless you buy two the same, they're not going to be here are the answers. So I'm not trying to give a runaround on this answer. But I think in order for someone to really change the settings on your computer, it should be done with a professional who's able to connect with you um, from another location. Now, that being said, there are easy ways that we can reduce how hard our computer is working to make sure the simulator focuses on keeping the aircraft accurate. For instance, removing the detail of trees, of grass, of reflection of the sun on water, of waves, of movement of windsocks. We can throttle all that down so that the program has to stop focusing on all those things that are fun to have and focus on the need to haves, which is how the aircraft operates. That's my first kind of all-encompassing way to get better performance out of a computer in a simulator. But to really get hands-on with your graphics and really get those frames per second up to 50, 60 frames a second, you would need someone to really look at your graphics card, your video card, and all those things one-on-one.
One more question for you, Chris. I had it here. Got a lot of questions all of a sudden. Missed the first half of the presentation. Is this recorded and available after to see what I missed? And I think a lot of people are having the same question. If you could answer that for them, Chris.
Absolutely. So we record these webinars. It's actually stored on a device here to where once we end this webinar, it's going to take a little bit of time to clean up, and then we upload it to our YouTube page. We have a specific webinars playlist on Sporty's Pilot Shop YouTube page. Considering it's 4 p.m. my time right now, I would imagine we'll have this up and live by 6, maybe 6:30 tonight. So you can absolutely watch it in good connection, good detail, good audio on YouTube within the next few hours.
And I think we also have a couple questions as well, Chris. What about the Mac? What should those users use?
Yes, that is a great question, and thank you for bringing that up. If you use a Mac, the program I like to recommend, because I think it's the only one that works, is X-Plane. So X-Plane will operate on Macintosh operating systems. The challenge is being able to connect devices to your MacBook. For instance, my MacBook Pro has 4 USB-C ports. All of the hardware options we covered today have a USB-A port. So that rectangular looking port that we see on the back of towers, that is how the hardware is going to plug in. So if you are using a MacBook, it is worth knowing you are going to need an adapter to allow that USB-A port to talk to the Apple. But other than that, X-Plane 11, X-Plane 12 works greatly on Macs. I also like to, while we're on the subject, mention X-Plane gives you a demo version. So you are able to test out the program in all its glory on your PC, on your Macintosh, and really make sure that that program runs well with your current hardware in your computer. So make sure your graphics card works, you got enough storage, all those things. If you like the way it operates, you go ahead and get the rest of the program by paying, I think X-Plane 12 is now $79.95, but you're able to kind of get that taster or teaser, if you will, and make sure it works on your computer. You like the way the program operates, and it's just a great feature of X-Plane in addition to being Mac compatible.
Next question for you, Chris. What are the pros and cons of multiple screens and what size is optimum?
Sure. So multiple screens, I can't really think of too many cons, honestly, other than you're going to need a lot of desk room. I myself have used a 3-screen setup at home for quite a few years. It's just a matter of getting it going, making sure that you have the angles configured. So if you have 3 that are all on the same plane, it's pretty simple. You just need different windows. When you start angling those outsides, you have to configure the program so that it shows your view at similar angles, if you follow me. So there is a little bit of setup, a little bit of a challenge there, but I look at it as once you've got it up and running, you save it, you forget about it, and then you just enjoy it. So personally here at Sporty's, and again, it's because of desk space, we use one really good to great monitor that's about a 40, and I want to say it's about a 37-inch monitor. But if you're doing wraparound screens, you can go as small as 30 inches and get a really great effect because now you're getting closer to them. Your peripheral vision is picking up those side monitors, and it really conveys that feeling of I'm in an actual aircraft rather than seeing things around you that aren't and confusing or telling your brain you're not actually there. So I endorse it, but I wouldn't exclusively endorse it, if you will.
What's a good way to calibrate the controls so that they work more realistically?
All programs will give you calibration abilities. So there's usually sliders, 0%, 100%. And a lot of the developers, when you plug in a Honeycomb Alpha, it is going to be plug and play. So when you plug in Microsoft or X-Plane, when you pull back, pitch is going to go up. When you push forward, pitch is going to go down. If you find that it is inaccurate to your type of aircraft, you can go in there and make little changes. Maybe that slider was at 55%, you want to try 50. That's still a little too much, take it down to 48 or 45. When you find that, you can save it as your profile of this is an accurate one for my Cherokee or things of that sort, and then it lives there. Every time you plug in the Honeycomb Alpha, it recognizes it. Those are the little small changes you can make to bring up the realism. But I typically find a lot of hardware pieces are accurate enough for a 172, which is where I do majority of my flying. Of course, you jump in a wide body, it's going to be different. But you have the ability in X-Plane, Microsoft Flight Sim to make those little changes, test them out, and then once you find the area you like, I'd recommend saving it and enjoying it.
Chris, are you excited about the sim future?
I am pretty excited about the sim future. I think, as mentioned earlier, the amount that we get from putting $500 into a flight simulator today is light years ahead of what we used to get in the 90s and in the early 2000s. So the ability to have a simulator at home is a lot more accessible for a lot more people. But I also think what the simulators are able to do when it comes to showing how training is performed, how aircraft operate, it's getting a lot easier too. So really the disconnect of aviation is a very exclusive, very high profile thing. It's becoming a lot easier for the masses. And I like that aspect of it, if you will. And I know there's a lot of projects out there. I know there are a lot of groups and a lot of companies that are focused on creating great programs, great hardware. I know the FAA is interested in how simulators can really help with budding pilots, which, I think we all recognize the airlines need more of them. And I really think simulators are a way to bridge that gap between interest in aviation and an intro flight. It really does help a lot of people, dip their toe into the waters. So really a lot of great things for it all around. And if you can't tell, I'm one who's on quite a few emails.
Where do I find a professional to help advise me on setting up flight sim and with the settings?
There are a couple companies we like to recommend. What is it? Flight Sim Training is one. And there are a couple others, but what I would recommend is send an email to Sporty's customer service regarding finding flight sim setup help, and that email will eventually make its way to me, and I will give you a couple resources there.
Can ForeFlight be paired with Microsoft Flight Sim on Xbox?
Okay, so we just opened a can of worms here, and this will be our final question today. If you did not get your question answered, please send an email to Sporty Support. Mention that you watched the webinar and you'd like a little more details. That'll find its way to me, and I'll respond directly to you. But to our last question, you are not able to connect ForeFlight to Microsoft Flight Sim on Xbox. Microsoft did open the program to go onto the Xbox platform. Because of that, the operating system is quite different from what works on a PC. Because of that, ForeFlight has not put the work into making sure that it can receive the way an Xbox communicates rather than the way a PC communicates, to my understanding. Another side effect of using an Xbox for Microsoft Flight Sim is hardware. There is a certain chip that Microsoft has required goes into hardware to enumerate on the Xbox platform, and there's only about 5 to 7 or 8 hardware pieces out there that play in the Xbox sandbox, if you will. Turtle Beach offers some really good Xbox compatible pieces. Honeycomb offers an Xbox compatible yoke, but it is about $100 more than the non-Xbox compatible yoke. So really, it is difficult to get a good setup using an Xbox. Frankly, I recommend getting a basic tower and from a big box store, setting that up at home, buying the PC version of Microsoft, and going that route because the doors really do open on how you can use it rather than Xbox. But that's my 2 cents. So that will conclude today's webinar. I really do appreciate everyone who stayed a little bit later. I know we're 10 minutes over time, but we have a lot of content to cover. Please send those follow-up emails to Sporty's customer service with the subject line or a call out of "I was on the webinar, I prefer this answered," and I'll get back to you. We appreciate everyone who sat in today. This webinar, again, will be posted on our YouTube playlist probably within the next few hours, and we'll see you at the next one. Goodbye, everyone.